All right. Welcome, everybody, to our Sentinel Stories today with Ryan Chapman and President Skoudis. So glad to have you all here. President Skoudis is going to be leading us today, and as you know, he is our president of SANS Technology Institute. Before he was our president, though, he was on the board of trustees, and he has been with us for many, many years. And we're very glad to have him here at the college and just really helping to spearhead our growth and supporting all that we do for our students and alumni. So, Ed, I'm going to turn it on over to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Ashley. And I am super excited for this. Ryan, I'm a huge fan. I think the world of you. I can't wait for our Sentinel students to hear more about you and your background. I'll give like a little, just a snippet of an overview of you because we're going to like tease this out and learn a lot more about you over the next hour. So the idea is I'll give you a little intro to Ryan, great, amazing SANS instructor. And then we'll do a little interview for 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to student questions. So Ryan has been working in digital forensics and incident response for over 13 years, and he's brought that knowledge as one of our faculty members to the Forensics 610 course, which he teaches, and as the course author to Forensics 528, which is pretty amazing. He also recently joined the college as a faculty research advisor, and we are absolutely delighted to have him on board. So Ryan, thank you for doing this. Thanks for agreeing to this interview. We're looking forward to you sharing all kinds of great stuff and inspiring us all. Um, Tell us your SANS origin story, if
Yes,
you.
for sure. So I took my first SANS course, technically with you, good sir,
How about that?
back in 2012. It
Mm,
was an on-demand version of SEC 504,
nice.
and I obtained my GCIH certification, the incident handler certification. And in 2013, I took the Forensic 610 course. Again, it was on demand. That was with Lenny Zeltzer, the
Nice.
primary author of the course to this day, and have just been enthralled with SANS since that time. In 2018, I took my first in-person course with SANS, which was SEC 599. I took that with Bryce, uh, and it was a great course. During the course, our team won the course challenge coin, and I was extremely excited about that. And then we participated in the Cyber Net Wars challenge.
Hmm.
And the team that we put together won the coin on that. We took first place, and I was
Congrats.
enthralled, excited. All the words. I'm befuddled to even come up with the words to describe the feelings of that. And we finished a couple hours before it ended. And I had been obsessed with SANS ever since I took my first course, with you. And I took the time, Eric Conrad, who's the author of three different SANS courses, and he's a professor with STI also.
Yep,
He's
yep.
been around for a long time. And then also, let's see, John from SEC 450 there was the two fellows who were running the event, the Cyber Net Wars. So
Cyber
when it
Defense
was
Networks. Yep, yep.
Yep. When it was over, I basically went up to them and I said, "Hi, I'm Ryan," and shook their hands. And I said that I was a full-time technical trainer for 6 years. I'm obsessed with SANS. This is my first in-person class, but someday I would like to train for SANS. That led to a conversation, and John at the time was actually putting together his SEC 450 content. During that time, I had actually put together a 5 week, 5 whole weeks, oh my goodness, training course for at day job, as we call it, where I was working. And I was training all of our SOC members. And he was creating a course on, how to become a SOC member, basically. So
Hmm.
we communicated and we had a great conversation. And then maybe about 6 months later, I kind of almost forgot about the endeavor, but then I received an email and said, "Hey, we would like to pull you in to SANS instructor training. Are you interested?" And I was like, duh. So
Yeah.
I was very happy about that. And then I found out it was because of that interaction with Eric and John that my name was floated, and I eventually, became an instructor and was teaching Forensics 610 reverse engineering malware for about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And I started getting a number of requests for what we at the time were calling Ask an Instructor talks
Yeah.
from larger SANS clients, purchasing many vouchers and sending many people through SANS courses for talks on ransomware. And it came about because people were associating ransomware with malware, right? The payload itself, well, that's malicious software, it's malware. So I was like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. ransomware is a whole campaign, and like the end of it is the malware. But I started doing some of those talks, and then that led to the question from SANS, would you be interested in writing a course on ransomware? And again, the answer was duh. So I did that, and I've been doing that ever since.
That is spectacular. I love hearing that. And it's every SANS instructor, every SANS course author has their own story, but they have certain unique elements to them. And based on what you just said, one of them is interacting with the SANS family. You come in as a SANS student, you get to know your instructors, you get to know the authors of the material, and SANS.edu students have a great opportunity for that. The other thing is being open and communicating, being interactive. And then there's always that sort of moment of surprise when they say, "Hey, you want to teach?" Well, gee, I do. Or, "Hey, you want a course author?" Wow. And it's just been great seeing you work your way forward in all of this. It's just a delight. I remember early on in your career in the Sansiverse, if I may call it that, um, Rob T. Lee came to me and said, "There's this new person, Ryan Chapman. Have you met him yet? And he's amazing." And we were both talking back and forth about you and all the great stuff that you're going to do. And I remember when he told me and he's going to write a ransomware course for us, and he's the best person out there to do this right now, and it's going to be awesome. And it's a great course. So thank you for that. But maybe we could go back even a little further. Appreciate the Sansiverse view. But how did you mentioned you did some training before, but you've been very mysterious about what it was that you trained. I mean, what kind of materials? I assume it was some sort of technical topic. And then how you even got involved in the domain of DFIR generally, and then more specifically ransomware. So tell us about that. The career arc
Those
before that. Yeah.
they're actually interrelated, which is fun, and they also have to do in a way with networking and communicating, talking with people, and being open and honest and having fun and learning, and all of a sudden you have opportunities. So I'm from the California Bay Area, as
Mhm.
people would say, not far from Silicon Valley itself, about an hour south, a town called Salinas, California. And growing up, it was a very small town. It's a farming town, if you will. We're actually known as the lettuce bowl of the world.
Oh,
When I was 8 years old and I went to Lima, Peru, I was in a market and they had all kinds of, just all the foods and wares and stuff. And we picked up a head of lettuce and we were like, wait a minute. And we looked on the back of it and it was produced in my hometown. And we're like, oh, yeah, we really are the lettuce bowl of the world. So, anyway, I was in that area and eventually had to move to where I am now, which is the Phoenix area of Arizona because my grandfather was my father. He raised me, and he was had moved out here to well, he was already retired, but he had moved out here to the Arizona area, and he had a stroke, and it was bad. And my family said, "Hey, you need to come visit." And I said, "Hey, no, I'm gonna move out there." So I moved out here about 20 years ago, and I needed a job. So I
yeah.
went to a job interview. I applied. I think back then it was Craigslist, Yahoo Jobs, if folks remember those. And I was in this one particular interview for an hour and a half.
Oh
And at the
boy.
very last minute, the woman who was interviewing me said, "Oh, by the way, how do you feel about being on the phones?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I would really like to avoid phones. I don't like communicating on the phones. It's just not me." Which is funny because I'm very personable and I'm a
Yeah.
social butterfly. I just don't like the phones. I'd rather
Huh.
do it in person. And at that point, after a full hour and a half, that's when she said, "Oh, well, this job is in a call center." And I was like, "What?"
Wow.
How did we not bring that up? So I took the job, and as soon as I got in there, I thought to myself, well, this will be kind of a temporary thing. I was a much younger individual, but I needed a job, and I thought I would transition into something fun, or I would have to get another job. In my training class that was 2 weeks long, I fell in love with our instructor. I was like, this guy is phenomenal. I love everything about him, his persona, his attitude, the way he trains, the way he described it. I loved it all. And I thought to myself, gosh, I would like to be a trainer here. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
So I put the word out there, and as in, like, I told everyone and anyone, like, I'm going to be a trainer here. And within 6 months, I became a trainer. So I was a trainer in a call center, and we were a tier 2/tier 3 call center, primarily for it was for large ISPs.
Yeah.
So I worked for a company called Two Wire, which sold DSL modems, digital subscriber line modems. And so the ISPs who use those modems, we would take calls on behalf of them when they would be escalated from the tier one.
Hmm.
So that's also when I enrolled in college, and I looked for any school I could find that was part of the NSA / Homeland Department of Security's CAE certification. What is
Yeah,
that?
SANS.edu.
Certified Academic Excellence or something like that, right? And there was one school out of the almost 70. This is back in 2011 that I was looking to transition into a graduate / master's program. And there was one school that had a program online, and so I went to that school. And during that time, I trained and taught and went to school for 6 years. And about 6 months prior to my graduation, I received a phone call from one of my prior students who had gone through the call center and had worked there for a couple of years and had since left. And he was bragging. He's being a braggart about his job in a new security operations center
Hmm.
for a very, very large organization. And he was dealing with things that were straight out of the movies, like you're reading a book kind of thing. And I was like, that sounds awesome. That's what I want to do.
Cool.
And my company at the time, I'm kind of a company man. I was there for 7 years and I planned to just like stay there. And when I told them I was coming up on graduation, they actually said, you know what? We really don't have anything in security and you may just want to look elsewhere. And I thought that was kind of odd. I was like, oh, okay, I guess. And it was like a week after that I got that phone call. And so this student was going off about how great it is and how amazing it is and how every day is like solving a puzzle and all this stuff. And I was like, yes. So I
Hmm.
interviewed there, and that's how I ended up getting into a security operations center and starting my career in security, which is in 2012.
Wow. And then 2013 happened. He started taking SANS courses and everything advanced from there. That
Yep.
is pretty cool. You mentioned the CAE designation. SANS.edu has such a designation now. It didn't at the time. And people would come to us and say all the time, why don't you have this? Why don't you have this? And they primarily associate it with undergraduate institutions. And SANS.edu didn't add the undergraduate piece until whatever it was, 4 or 5 years ago. And within adding that, once we added the undergraduate degree and undergraduate certificates now too, then that all popped into place. We got the CAE designation through a lot of hard work by a lot of people, but we got that designation pretty quickly. So just a little interesting fact that people would ask us that all the time. And well, that's really cool. So you do amazing work. You're kind of like my go-to person. You see this every once in a while in the SANS instructor Slack. One of my friends or colleagues or somebody will get hacked with something, and I ping various people, and you're on my list of, hey Ryan, I got an issue. One of my friends got hit with ransomware. Can you help? Thank you for that. I'm sorry to bother you with that, but hey, work on the thing. If you're available, make money on it. That's all very good. But I want to personally thank you for being available for that kind of stuff. Really, you do great work. I would love to hear from you one of your most interesting, fun ransomware stories that you personally handled. Something that was like you really took a lot took away from it, or it really made you think, or it went in a way you didn't expect. I think our students would love to hear that.
So ransomware, so I worked as an incident response consultant for, larger firms for about 5 years. And during that time, I found that we were working a lot of ransomware cases, which really is what started me down the ransomware path. And during that time, there have been a number of cases that have been novel.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, the majority of ransomware cases, when you work them as a consultant and you go from company A to B to C to XYZ, you find that so much of it is the same thing over and over
Yeah.
and over.
Yeah.
It's the worst day, week, month, year, um, longer for many of the organizations that are impacted. But as a consultant, you just start to feel like it's the same. It's the same kind of thing. However, when I first started doing the consulting route, it wasn't long after that. It was in early 2019 that I worked a case associated with Maze ransomware. Maze, M-A-Z-E, like you have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
reverse a maze. They were the first group that really pushed hard and made it a thing to perform data exfiltration and use it as a secondary means of extortion.
yeah.
And they were the ones who really set that model, which is what so many actors at this point today, are modeled after, and or they have moved completely to, and they've actually moved away from encryption. So when I was working that case, there were a number of things that stood out. First and foremost, the amount of data exfiltrated and how quickly it was exfiltrated, especially because they were doing it from cloud to cloud. So if you
Hmm.
think how big is your internet pipe, right? When you're connecting in through and they're coming in via multiple proxies and things like that, you would think, oh, well, the data is not going to transfer that very quickly out. However, what they were doing, excuse me, is for the victim organizations when they would get into their cloud environments, when you're moving data from cloud A to cloud B, or even technically cloud A to cloud A, in a different container bucket, usually some type of bucket, GCP, AWS, whatever. It moves really fast, really, really fast. So they would initiate, oh, let's see, you have a database of databases. Like all of your databases are in this one large database. I'm just going to take the whole thing. And it would move fast. And we're talking about, gigabytes upon hundreds of gigabytes sometimes, just blazing speed. And that was one thing. On top of that, the way their outlook and their approach with my second maze case, they released they called it a press release, whatever with all that. It was just an article, a blog post on their data leak site. And this was during the COVID time, so about a year after my first case with them. And this was the second novel case, and it was the same group that really got me. It kind of got me into thinking more from the perspective of the ransomware actors. Reason
Mm.
being, when they released this press release, they started straight out, and I actually have this screenshot in my class, and for that matter, I can actually link everyone here. Let me just do this on my other screen here to an image of exactly what I'm talking about. Oh, maybe not in my work computer because we block Dropbox, which is where my class share is. Okay, well,
Oh, there
anyway,
you go.
so I took a screenshot of it and I talk about it. They released a statement in July of 2020, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was, "Hey, we know the world's in a global pandemic. To be blunt, everything sucks for everyone. We know that, but we don't care." It was basically a we don't care message. And they were lowering the communication timeline requirement from, I want to say it was like 10 days to 3 days, saying that their victims had to communicate with them within 3 days or they would just release everything,
The
to the
time
public.
element. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it was just the terminology they utilized. They were basically saying that, hey, look, if you cannot negotiate with us, it's not our job to be a psychologist. It's not our job to understand how you think or why you cannot communicate and or negotiate. Sucks for you. Basically, it was rough. It was really
Mm.
direct, and it was horrible. It was pretty horrible, to be honest.
Yeah,
And
gosh.
that got me thinking more along the lines of, oh yeah, these are human beings. These are people. And they're outright, yeah, they're performing ransomware attacks. So to a degree, they don't care. Duh, right? They're financially motivated. But when that press release came out, it really got me thinking more like, wow, they really don't care. And they're saying straight out, we don't care.
Yeah.
So it got me focusing more on the aspect of tracking the threat actors themselves, which is something that I've dabbled in over the years. I'm more of a response prevention, detection, response fella.
Hmm.
But I started working more with people whose full-time job is tracking the actual actors, putting names to them, addresses, social media accounts to them and their families, that type of thing. So I would say that those were some of the novel things that early on caught my attention, and they both happen to be related to Maze ransomware.
That is pretty awesome. Really cool. And I read your course description in preparation for this,
Mhm.
and I can see how the course itself on ransomware is influenced by all the stuff that you're telling us now about your background. You can see it's while it's focused on ransomware and how to manage that as an incident. I can see from it that there's sort of a SOC understanding, an operational understanding of security in your course. I haven't taken the course yet. I do take some SANS courses myself, and I love doing it. So I would like to take yours. It's got obviously the malware piece of it because that's the sort of foundational tool that is used by them. Um, a threat hunting aspect to the course that seems to be a major part of it, and it's 528, right?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, it looks like a tremendous course, and it is one of the bedrock courses of the SANS DFIR curriculum. We are getting some student questions in. Can we turn to those now? I'd like to ask you some of those. I'll take it, Ashley, if that's all right. Good. Okay. Got a practical thing that came in from Omer. What tips or advice do you have for those interested in pursuing a career in DFIR or threat hunting? So, he wants to go in that field. What tips do you have for somebody going in there?
Would it be okay if in the chat I posted a big list of links?
Sure, but I would like to hear you just comment on it too, so it's not just a big list of links.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So I am gonna drop this big old. Oh, maybe it's too long. Aw. All right, that might be actually a bit too long for the chat. We'll follow up with that in
Yep.
Slack or
Zoom
something
is
like
weird that way. It just
that.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so for DFIR, I highly recommend that people try to get into a security operations center. As an alternative to that is working for an MSSP, managed security services provider.
Hmm.
Reason being, those types of groups are the ones that see constant alerts. They're the ones that see noisy false positives. They're the ones that see true positives in disguise. They're the ones that see true positives that scream, I'm a true positive. I'm a problem. Go deal with me. And many times, I started in a SOC myself, right? So there's that. Take it with a grain of salt because of personal experience, I guess. But being in a situation where you see a variety of alerts and you're responsible for triaging those alerts and you're responsible for understanding what is just part of what happens, what may associate with an organization's baseline, like regular operating baseline, what might be anomalous or what might be malicious is a great way to ingrain yourself into understanding better how to move into roles in places like incident response consulting or moving into like threat hunting, which is what I do now.
Yeah.
And for threat hunting, that is a question I get so often that a week or two ago, I actually set up a list and I have, oh gosh, I don't know, 12, 13, 15, something or other things that are threat hunting research resources, and then training for threat hunting, and then some books on threat hunting, along with a miscellaneous article that recently came out involving results of threat hunting. So I get people all the time who say, how do I get into DFIR? And for the students here, you have a wonderful opportunity in being able to select your courses. It's funny enough, I'm a faculty research advisor here with STI. So when you're writing your thesis paper, I will be on the board of people that might actually be helping you with your proposal, eventually grading your paper, things like that. So I'm not intimately familiar with the particular classes that are available for the different paths, although I have seen a number that I'm well aware are available, such as Forensics 500 or Forensics 508. And of course, like Forensics 500 is your bread and butter, where you learn, what forensic artifacts are available for review. How can they be identified on a system? How can they be collected from that system? How can they be parsed in order to provide, actionable intelligence? And then, of course, how can that parsed data then be analyzed and then to make your decisions, right? So something like that is big. There's also a website that I very much love called the DFIRreport.com, and I can drop that into the chat.
Please do.
Boop. That is put together by a number of volunteers who have very large honey nets with honey pots, and they basically just make themselves vulnerable. And they
Mhm.
allow threat actors to come in and do, carry out all their shenanigans. And when they do, the ones that perform novel attacks, This group basically investigates it as would a large scale, incident response team with a large firm. And then they produce these very long articles based on what they found, what the threat actors did, et cetera, et cetera. And if you go to a site like this, it's not just, oh, hey, I read this article, but rather, when you read through the article, focusing on the fact that you understand, or if you don't, that you then research every little thing that is stated in the article. If these
Hmm.
articles are 40 pages long and they include 30 something odd screenshots, any screenshot, any attacker command that's, denoted in here, they're there for a reason. The
Yeah.
the authors didn't just say like, "Oh, this will be fun." No, they're putting it in there for a darn good reason. So when you see this command, and say I'm looking at one of the articles randomly, and without getting too far into the weeds, I'll just give one example and then move on. But it starts off PowerShell.exe, and you're like, okay, cool. And then it has a PowerShell code snippet. And in that PowerShell code snippet, the first thing is get sim instance, Win32 shadow copy. And you go, oh, okay, they're doing a command. Next, like, well, hold on. What is get sim instance? What is that? Why would the threat actor be running that? And what
Hmm.
is Win32 shadow copy? Well, it probably has to do with volume shadow copies. Well, yeah, it does. But
Hmm.
why are they using a sim instance via PowerShell? Because that's actually part of the WMI database.
Yeah.
Why are they doing that? So it's more of not just reading the article, but every little thing that you see within that article, paying attention to it and understanding its purpose. And taking that, abstracting a little bit back to DFIR, we have a memory analysis course at SANS, and I used volatility for many years for memory analysis. When you run a general, what do we just call them? Just a command via volatility. They call them commands. The command reference for volatility 2324 3.0, whatever. And you see that there are columns. They're usually a series of columns. It'll have the process ID, the parent process ID, something called H. What's H? A lot of people see these columns that are by default displayed by the tool authors. They'll recognize 3, 4, 5 of the 10 columns, think that they understand what's happening, and will move on. Why are those other columns there? The software developer put those columns there in the default view for a reason. What is the H? What's H mean, right? Oh, it's a handle. What's a handle?
Hmm.
The more you understand. So the idea being that you don't just read through something and get kind of a feel, a general, consensus. Oh, okay, I kind of understand what's happening. But rather, all the data displayed to you, each column that's displayed to you, each type of value, or I should say, each type of data type, for that matter,
Yeah.
and its associated value. Why is it being shown? Research it, understand it. Work within your classes and your discussions to talk about them. Why are they important, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And pulling that apart, so you're not just a tool jockey, you're really understanding. And I think, especially in an age of AI, that's important, right?
Yes.
That is very cool. Let's see. Here's a fun question. What were your favorite SANS courses to take?
My favorite SANS courses to take. I think that because I'm obsessed with malware, when
Yeah.
I took Forensic 610 in February, I want to say February of 2013, that was really eye-opening for me. And I thought that I was learning malware analysis for about a solid year prior to taking the course. And I honestly thought at the time, well, it's a 600 level for SANS, but like I've been learning a lot of malware. I have some mentors who are very, very strong. Like I we'll see how much I learn. Ho, 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 ho. I learned a ton. And that ended up being the first class that I trained, when I came on board with SANS. So
Mhm.
again, I teach it now. I'm involved with it in the back end and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's one of the ones I like the most. Of course, I would say my course, but that doesn't count. I can't say my
Right,
course.
right. I get
Yeah,
that.
you can't do that.
610 is a great answer. Lenny is such an amazing person, and there's so many good people that teach it. You, Anuj, just great, great folks. Um, I used to get together with Lenny every 6 months to a year. He and I would just get together for either dinner or lunch, and I am convinced that I'd come away from those dinners or lunches way smarter than I went in, just because of Lenny. So let's see. Got another. There's a lot of questions coming in about your career and how it changed and developed over time. There's one from Giovanni here that's really quite good. Listen to this. Hi, Ryan, it says. How did you transition out of the SOC and into a dedicated IR role? So you could see somebody like, okay, I'm doing SOC and I'm doing fine at it. How do I get an incident response? What skills did you need to build? And did you make the jump within the same company?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So I was working for, and thank you for the question, by the way. I was working for about 7 years in a SOC cert environment. I was on the SOC for about a year, year and a half, something like that. And then I became a lead in the SOC. And then about, I want to say 3 years in, LinkedIn has the actual years. I'm horrible with time, by the way. I could be way off here.
Right.
But I eventually transitioned over to our CERT. While the CERT was the incident handling team, in reality, the SOC handled most of the incidents, including
Mhm.
when we would have a declared incident. Sure, one of the CERT members would jump in and function as the incident commander, but most of the actual tasks would be done by our SOC, which is different from most organizations. Many organizations have the Security Operations Center, focuses on alerts, and they are queue driven. And when there's a real incident, like, uh-oh, then the CERT kind of handles it in-house with themselves. But that's not how we functioned. So because of that, I had a lot of exposure to working larger scale incidents. When I moved from the SOC to the CERT, one of the main things that I had the pleasure of doing was being involved in the IC pool, as we called it. So you can't just have one incident commander within a given team because they will get 4 days straight working 20 hour or whatever it is, and like you're done. You're mentally just you're checked out. So we had to have a pool of people to pull from, and I was added to it right away. I had a lot of experience with that. I was able to move from a SOC/CERT environment with a private company, but it was a very large company. And keep in mind that company built, maintained, helped design, helped, um, I should say, proctor the building of, et cetera, of things like many of the nuclear facilities in the United States, many of our
Mm.
national labs. It was a very big, important company. I got lucky being hired there because that one guy
Mhm.
was bragging. Remember, he called me and he
Yeah,
was
yeah.
bragging. Yeah,
How
that's how
about
I got
that?
my job there. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So when I had that ability to be involved in so many incidents, I was actually able to move to incident response consulting as a principal. And I came in and I said, "Hey, I've done a lot of IR. I've worked nation state cases. I've run nation state cases. I've been the incident commander of them, whatever." That's honestly not super normal though.
Mhm.
Normally, you have people who are in a tiered SOC where you have one, two, maybe three, and a CERT team might be completely separate from that. Unfortunately, maybe even siloed from that, which I find ridiculous. And the best way to transition to a dedicated IR role is within the SOC to move as high as you can
Yeah.
and to truly take the time that you're allocated and to make sure that you are allocated as politely and professionally as possible. Like, I want to do this on projects, on research projects, and being able to hunt basically. So we had a hunting meeting twice a week on our SOC, and we would hunt for things, find crazy things. So it's, one of the number one things for hunting within organizations to utilize as a resource is prior alerts and incidents. And
Yeah.
a lot of folks don't realize that. They think, oh, I have to go get an intel feed. And you're like, hold on. What's all this? What are the things you've already actioned over the past, 3 months, 2 months, 6 months, whatever? So I recommend that working from a SOC into a dedicated IR role is that you give yourself the ability, however that can be done, to not only learn the tooling, to learn the foundational knowledge, just as Ed said, behind the tooling. I click that button, it shows me a thing. Why or how? How is it doing that? What is it actually parsing? What is it actually showing me? If you have the ability to review the code, like, something like that, like a Zimmerman tool, go do that, and then moving to a place where you can be involved in declared incidents. And if you can not do that, then focusing on the reports that are generated in those incidents and focusing on the people that are involved in them and just talking to them and asking them, what tooling are you using and what things are you finding and how are you finding the lessons learned are a very important thing. Learning from lessons learned, because in IR consulting, oftentimes the initial infection vectors are related to something silly that the organization just failed to do, to be honest. I call it security 101 failures almost every time.
Yep.
Sure, 0 days might be a thing, but not so much. So yeah, it's just leveraging the access that you have while you're on that SOC, the people that you have on the team. Map out, look at the MITRE attack framework. Map out what am I good at? What am I not that good at? Or what could I use more work on? And also look at what's your main thing. I'm good with email alerts and I'm good with I don't know malware alerts. All right. What about network security monitoring alerts? I'm not
Mhm.
that good at those. Focus on those. Go work with the people who are good at those.
Yeah.
Which is why when I moved from the SOC to the CERT at my former company, we had 4 teams on that CERT. Digital forensics, where I really belonged. Malware, where I wanted to work. Threat intelligence, which I had been doing quite a bit of, and network security monitoring. A job came up on network security monitoring first. And I was
Mhm.
like, that's the one I know the least about. And I told my wife, and I said, I don't think I'm very interested because I want to go do the other stuff. And she said, what did you just say to me? And I said, that's the one that I know the least about. And she goes, that's the one you need to get a job on. That's the one that you need to learn so that you have those 4 pillars, those 4 foundations, and then you can build on it. And I did that, and it worked out.
Smart advice. Good
Not
for
that
her.
she was right. She's never right. Don't tell her. Not that she
Certainly
was.
smart.
Don't tell her that.
Uh, hey, we got a question from AJ that's sort of related to that, but underpins the whole thing here. AJ says, "Hello. What traits or habits have you noticed help allow someone to excel in DFIR?"
I've had this question so many times
I'm
over the years.
sure. Yeah.
Every time it's the same answer. To start out, we stand on the shoulders of giants. None of us are an expert on anything. I wrote the SANS course on ransomware, right? Do I consider myself an expert in ransomware? I don't like calling myself an expert at all. I hate that actually. Um, but I have learned from a lot of different people. And when it comes to defer, I think the number one way to truly excel is to find the people who are already doing what it is you're interested in and learn from them. If learning from them is as simple as reading their articles, watching their videos on YouTube, watching their former conference presentations, awesome. If it actually involves working with them, great, that's awesome. Reaching out to people and even just straight asking, do you have time to do a mentorship or could you point me in the right direction to learn X, Y, or Z can work very, very well. Many of us in this space are super busy and it's
Yeah.
it's difficult to just take on a ton of, mentorees. But I had someone recently reach out and said, hey, I really want to learn more about threat hunting, and I'm not finding a lot of resources, and I've spent a lot of time actually doing it before I came to bother you. And I thought, you know what? There's really not a very good list on that. And so I put one together for this person, and I've shared it in I don't know how many groups since then, and I'm all proud of it. Like, look, I didn't write any of this. It's a reference to Splunk's peak threat hunting framework. I didn't write that. It's a link to their threat hunters cookbook. I didn't write that. It's tutorials by Splunk on hunting. It's a CrowdStrike report. I don't work for CrowdStrike. You get the idea, right? Like I didn't do
Yep.
any of this. But if someone really wants to get into it, this is kind of the place that you go. Also, I would say that monitoring articles, threat intel feeds, and quite honestly, people laugh at me when I say this, but I stick by it. People often ask me, it might even be a question in here that we might get, how do you stay abreast of the things that are changing in our ever evolving landscape of cybersecurity? And my answer is social media. Now,
Yeah.
first off, I hate social media. I've been off Facebook for years now, to be honest. But LinkedIn has become better than Twitter for me. I just happen to have connections with the right people, I guess, that I get phenomenal intel via LinkedIn of all places now. Twitter, X, if you're on Mastodon or Blue Sky or one of the other ones I can't even think of right now when Twitter started going downhill, you find some really, really good information there. Learning and recognizing no one knows everything. There are many people out there who are providing resources and are willing to help and communicating with them. For me, it's kind of easy because I've always been an extrovert. But for many of us in this space, they're not extroverts, quite the
Mhm.
opposite.
True. True. Yeah.
And I just implore people to push yourself and to go out there. For example, anyone who's watching this now, later on the recording, whatever, if you ever see me at a conference or whatever, you better say hello. You better do it. And you might be like, oh, it's that Ryan guy. He does sand stuff. Oh, it's cool. And then walk away. No, stop it. Come up and say hi. What do you work on? What do you do? What do you want to learn? And I'll give you random advice.
That's
Maybe it'll be
awesome.
helpful.
That's awesome.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
reach out to those that you can.
that is very good advice. The question though was what are the traits that someone needs to thrive in DFIR?
That's a
What
good point.
character
So I was
traits,
I was
intellectual,
focusing on the trait of being a networker and
right?
working and
Learning. Yeah,
communicating with others, and I went down my little rabbit hole.
it's all good.
So yeah, overall trait is being able to think outside the box, being able to apply critical thinking, not forcing yourself to only adhere to a process or procedure that you've read elsewhere or have been trained formally on. And as far as habits, I'm going to tell, maybe some folks don't want to hear this, but I'm going to say it. You're not going to be as successful as you could be in DFIR if you don't take the time outside of your education, your training, or day job, or
Mhm.
combination thereof, whatever your current endeavors are, to continue learning. So this has been something that a lot of people that I know, they say, I work 40 hours a week. Outside of that, I'm done. I don't read any articles. I don't do this. I don't do that. I'm like, okay, that's cool. You might progress, but for me, I took it way too far the other way, and I lived and breathed. I mean, I still kind of do. Lived and breathed my career. Now, that was too much. And my wife one
Yeah.
day sat me down very gently and very politely. That's a lie. And she said, "Hey, you need to calm down, right?" We'll just say it was a very polite conversation. Sure. But finding that thin line between spending a little bit of time outside of whatever your endeavors are. If you're a full-time student right now and you're like, I'm learning, that's what I'm doing. I'm learning throughout the entire week. That's what I'm doing. Like, okay, well, at the same time, it wouldn't hurt to, pop open Google and be like, current day threats or current day ransomware attacks, or pop open an LLM, even something like ChatGPT. What are the top 5 malware bots that are wreaking havoc out there? And it gives you 5. You're familiar with one of them. What about the other 4? Maybe
Yeah.
go Google those and learn a little bit about them. Traits and habits really for me come down to being able to interact with others, think out again outside the box. I'll say it again. And one way that I will stress that we look for that is I have run interviews at every company I've been with since working in security. I have run technical interviews, first round, fourth round, whatever. And the way that I run technical interviews is I will typically show someone a screenshot, and then I'll say something like, starting at the top left-hand side, what do you see? And I will preface the setup with, I don't want you to stare at the screen quietly thinking and then give me an answer. I don't want that at all. I want you to, it's a little crass, but verbally vomit. You're mentally vomit, basically, is what I meant to say. Let me know exactly what you're thinking as you're thinking when you see it. And as they start to traverse down a path, even if it is completely wrong, like so far wrong, but if the way that they think is if I'm going, oh, and then they would go there,
Yeah.
what? Oh, okay. We might even hire that person, even if they were wrong on many things, but they just had that mentality of understanding how to move from A to B to C to D to whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah,
You want
traits
to you
and
want to see their
habits.
chain of thought, just like when somebody's using
Yes.
an AI. Show
Yep.
me how you think about it. I find that fascinating to see what ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, their chain of thought. Sometimes you see it just go the wrong direction. It's like, whoa, whoa, just
Yeah.
back that truck up. You just
Yep.
went way off. That's not what I'm talking about. And other
Hmm.
times it's like, okay, it seems to understand this, quote unquote, understand. Um, there's a question from Brooke and a question from Omer that are very similar to each other. So I'm going to kind of synthesize them. Um, how has incident response and in relation to that, job roles within Blue Team changed in the last year or two due to what we're seeing with the onset of AI use by threat actors? So, how have things changed the last year or two in incident response and the roles that we have given the offensive use of AI?
So AI is being leveraged like crazy by the threat actors. And what I personally believe, this is a personal take, this is a Ryan take, not a SANS take, not a day job take. I'm not mentioning where I work, but you can just go to LinkedIn and see exactly where I work, whatever. So my thought on this is that it is enabling speed. One large consulting firm recently did a study and they found there was I'm forgetting, I want to say 250% increase in speed. I want to say it's 250%. And they also carried out, the same firm, this was from Palo Alto Networks. They also carried out an attack, a ransomware attack, and they were able to do it in about 48 hours. And then they replicated the same thing, but via AI, and they did it in 20 something odd minutes.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I see from incident response is a need to work even faster, but not just from the IR team like coming in when an incident is declared, but furthermore that organizations need to rely more on something I've never liked. I'm still uncomfortable with it, but I have to embrace where we are at, in 2025, automation, and for that matter, playbooks, and for that matter, response playbooks. So what I mean by that is if you have, say, a SOAR component, security orchestration and engineering and response, playbook of some methodology, a lot of times over the past number of years, I've said, yeah, use those. An alert comes in, you have it triage, you have it run a couple additional queries, you have it do some things. But I've never been a big fan of like, oh, and for that matter, have it potentially isolate the host
Yeah.
or disable that account. I've never been a big fan of that. But right now, you might need to do that. So incident response is having to work more with, or I should say, getting to work more with, excuse me, with detection engineering and working more on the detection teams of, well, hey, this is how we've detected this in the past. And the IR team is, well, this is how we've responded to it. And you have to kind of join those up a little more these days because of AI and the speed at which things are happening.
Well, I'll tell you from a penetration testing perspective, I have a team of pen testers that work for me, 18 people in total. We are finding more critical and high risk vulnerabilities faster than we've ever found before because of leveraging AI. It's like the golden age of pen testing now. And I can only imagine what that means for real world adversaries. And then I can sadly think about what that means for incident response teams and SOC. And it's crazy times. It feels, Ryan, like to me, 1997 all over again, which is exciting and scary and hard. Um, speaking of hard questions, I've got one for you. This is, well, I won't say the name of the person on this one. I am in my 40s, starting out in cybersecurity. That is wonderful. That is good for you. Wish you the very best of that. A career switcher, I'd say, right? How do I make sure that I don't fall prey to being excluded from the hiring pool solely based on my age, especially when applying for entry-level positions such as junior cybersecurity analyst? What advice would you have somebody 40 years old, jumping into cyber, doesn't want to be unfairly discriminated against because he's a career changer?
That's a good darn question. I might be a little biased on this because I actually very much appreciate career switchers.
Me too.
So some of the best people that I've worked with in quote unquote cyber, depending on, whether they're in an intel group or malware or whatever, have come from completely different positions. I once interviewed, she was still young at the time, a young woman who had worked in banking for 7 or 8 years and was applying to a security operations center for which I was interviewing. And she said that she got her start by working with the SOC team on her off hours. So she actually went to
Mm.
her boss and she said, "Hey, I would like to work on our SOC someday. Can you assign me to that team for some of my workday so that I can learn?" And her boss said no. And then she said, "Okay, well, how about this? Can you work with that team to get me hours to work with them outside of my work hours?" And he was like, "Sure."
Hmm.
So she did that to the point where she ended up landing an interview with my team at the time, who was fairly difficult to get an interview with, but we had a technical form, a pre-analysis thing that she nailed, and she killed the interview. I was very surprised. I've seen many of those types of people. Some of the best, one of my favorite guys I worked with in threat intel had a history background, PhD in
Sure.
history,
Yeah.
and had studied, hold on, archaeology for many years. And I'm like, archaeology, like really? He's great. So I actually like people who transition there. But what I will say is, especially for entry level positions, whenever you're coming in, a lot of us in the recruiting realm aren't really paying attention to age. We're more so paying attention to experience. So what I would recommend is on your resumes, say you're in your 40s or even your 50s, and you have a number of jobs prior, but yet those jobs have maybe nothing to do with security. Well, how many of those do you really need to include? You're going for an entry level position. So for some of those, you might have had management experience, and that might relate. Maybe keep that. One could be, I have a number of people who are younger, for example. It kind of goes the other way, by the way, or
Hmm.
very young, and they'll have like two fast food places, on their resume, and but they'll just like that's it, just like yeah, I worked at Jimmy John's subs, sub sandwiches, and I'm like, all right. But even then, having like, oh, I worked at Jimmy John's, I was a shift lead. I was responsible for five different sandwich makers and the following, like, okay, that can actually be kind of useful, right? What I'm saying is age really isn't much of something that we look at. It's experience. And for entry level positions, what shows that you're truly a candidate to me? And again, I might be biased and I might be someone who's not good at building. I saw a question in here somewhere about work-life balance. Actually, the next
Hmm.
question down.
We'll get
And
to that. Yep.
I'm horrible at doing that myself. I can give you great feedback on it, but I'm horrible at it myself. Is doing something like taking on a research project, starting a blog. You don't have doing presentations. You don't have to truly thoroughly understand something in order to write a blog article on it. You can even have a blog called Cool Things I'm Learning.
Yeah.
And that can basically be about the things you're learning. And you can reference the people from whom you're learning them, that kind of thing. Some type of project, some type of research, some type of something, blog, YouTube video, whatever, that just shows your interest and or describing your home lab environment. Oh, I wanted to set up a home lab, so I read a bunch of articles, I set one up. Even if your home lab, you're like, this is horrible compared to what people who have been in the industry for 20 plus years are doing. Who cares? You're showing your interest. You're showing that you've put, not just the time in to research something and learn about it, but that you've actively tinkered and come up with something.
Yeah.
I'll say right now, my home lab consists of a network attached storage and one PF Sense host on a little bitty NUC, a little bitty thin
Oh yeah.
client. I have a horrible home network. It's super lame, and people always make fun of me for it, but I don't care.
That's
So,
why we have the
yeah,
cloud now, right? I mean,
yeah, right, yeah.
well, that's great and really good advice. I would also suggest, go to a local security conference. There's a lot of B-sides conferences around. SANS is increasingly doing these community night things, which are fun.
Mhm.
So you don't have to take a class at SANS. You just show up at community night, and there's little snacks and stuff, and usually a couple presentations. So look for those. Also, last week, it's interesting that you asked that question, Mr. Person that I'm keeping anonymous, or Miss Person that I'm keeping anonymous. Um, I read a book last week. It's not published yet. It will be published soon. I was, one of the early readers of it because they wanted to get my opinion on it. It's called Switching to Cyber: The Mid-Career Guide to Launching a Cybersecurity Career by Josiah Dykstra and Helen Patton. They reached out to me about 2 months ago, said, "Hey, we got this book coming out later this year. You want to read it?" I said, "Sure." It's a great book. I was so impressed, and it goes over very systematically how to enter the cybersecurity space as a career switch mid career, and it's very practical. Lots of great ideas. I sent them a couple of recommendations and small tweaks here and there, but it's very good. I don't know exactly when it's going to be published. It'll be out in the next month or two, but look for it, and I think it will help a lot. I wanted to read it because I get asked the question all the time. It's like I should know more about that, and that book is really good. Um,
Cool.
let's jump into this now. We got about, I guess, 5 minutes left, right? Is that okay, Ashley, if we go 5 more minutes? Yep. Um, in your opinion, what is the work life balance like for those in the DFIR or threat hunting or other sophisticated blue team roles? What do you think? That's it could be it's all over the place, right? I mean, it depends on where you work. It depends on, the sensitivity of your employer. It depends on where you are in your life. If you got six little kids, that's probably versus, your kids are all grown up and moved out. It's a tough question to answer across the board. But please, Ryan, answer it.
Yeah, so I will say that if you are interested in working incident response consulting, especially if it's for yourself, but for sure, if you're working for a large organization, that you are probably going to have a very poor work-life balance. You might be expected to work 60 to 80 hours a week, but that depends on the organization. So I worked for two organizations over 5 years as a DFIR consultant. I was a principal, which meant I was leading cases, and that much more so. By the way, here's a tip, here's a trick. If you get in as an entry level and then you move up to senior and they ask you if you want to become a principal, pause. Think it through. Do you
Yeah.
do you really want to be a principal? Because if you're going to be leading cases when that client needs someone over the weekend, like that's you. Just a
Yeah.
heads up. But it really depends on the organization. I actually moved from the organization where I work now, which is right on LinkedIn, and from IR to threat hunting because I couldn't take it anymore. Like really, really couldn't take it anymore. Slash, my wife told me that was done. So I moved to threat hunting. I work 40 hours a week. I am a team lead on the threat hunting team. And I do not have on call. I don't have a work phone. I like it's 40 hours a week. Done. That's kind of a fib. I'm a little bit of an overdoer. So
Well,
42,
you are a
40.
SANS instructor too,
Yeah, I
so
was gonna say
there's that.
plus there's SANS authoring and I had do other conference stuff and whatever. But still, for my day job, 40 hours a week. Before I was doing 60 to 80 hours a week. If you are working on a SOC and you might be shift based, and oftentimes those are 40 hours a week. You might even have 4 10-hour days, which is what I did for 3.5 years or however long I was on the SOC. I loved that. 3 days a week, or excuse me, 4 days a week. Oh, that's wonderful. However, as soon as you start to move to, oh, okay, you can be in the pool of incident commanders to run an incident. Incidents don't stop. They don't take a break. The threat actors don't stop. They don't take a break. So you just have to keep that in mind. Threat hunting, threat research, threat intelligence, malware analysis. Those jobs can be thought of on one hand as 40 hours a week. And on the other hand, if you're working closely with the incident response teams, they might need you also on the weekend at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, et cetera, et cetera. So just keep that in mind. It really depends on the employer, but especially for IR specific roles, then your work-life balance is going to be impacted.
Okay, Ryan, you have 1 minute left before we hand this thing over to Ashley to close us out. What's one thing you would like to impart on these wonderful SANS Sentinel students that are joining us? Something to inspire, motivate. You got 1 minute. Go.
Each and everything that you learn, that you're learning, take advantage of it. When I was doing my graduate program, there were many things that I would come across that I didn't understand. I would understand 80 to 90% of a subject. I'd be scoring 99% in my class. I was obsessed with school. Oh, I had to have all A's. I had to have a 4.0. But there were still a number of things I didn't know. So what I started doing is keeping a list of to learn. I would categorize it by the type of learning it was, by the topic that it was, by links and resources I had already found, and prioritization of how it would help me down the line, how it would help me in the short, mid, and long term, career wise, personally, etc. I highly recommend doing that. If you're writing a paper and you come across a couple different references and you're like, I don't quite get those, but I need to get this paper done. Take note of those things and utilize the ability that you've identified something that you would like to learn, and prioritize them and align those priorities and all the above that I just said to your work-life balance. And honestly, don't go too far down into the rabbit hole of security. Keep a work-life balance. Make sure your mental sanity ah, and your family come first. That can be very important. You can get lost in this career, so don't do that.
Well said, Ryan. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. You know who else used to write down things that he wanted to learn was Leonardo da Vinci. I just finished 2 weeks ago reading his biography by Walter Isaacson, and he used to have all these long lists of all the different things he wanted to learn. So, hey, we got to most of the questions. There were a couple that we didn't get to directly answer here online, but thank you for the great questions, Ryan. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your passion with us all. And Ashley, you want to close us out?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ryan. We appreciate you taking the time to be here today. And Ed, thank you always for
It's a joy.
hosting.
It's a joy.
Everybody, we really appreciate you being here, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Thanks, guys.
Bye.